once said, excellence is the gradual result of always trying to do better. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerdy Optometrist, a podcast channel for all things optometry. And this is your host, Ukti. Before we get started with the episode, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel on all your favorite platforms. Today, we have someone who has been striving towards excellence in not just one, but multiple areas in optometry and eye care. And he's definitely a huge inspiration for all of us. And it's my pleasure to have Dr. Trusit Dave on my episode for today. He's an optometrist, researcher, and an inventor. Yes, he's 3 in 1. I promise you, we're going to dive into all of that. He has a PhD, which involved research into corneal topography, aberrometry, and the development of topography-based algorithm. He's the owner of an optometry practice in Coventry, specializing in dry eye, myopia, and keratoconus. He's a fellow of American Academy of Optometry and has published papers in numerous journals. He's a co-author of Orthokeratology, Principles and Practice. Well, I am not done yet. Dr. Trusit Dave has lectured all over the world and is a consultant to the medical device industry and a co-inventor of a technology owned by Topcon. Dr. Dave is the founder and chairman of Optimed, the developer of CAPTIV8 Connect, a patient engagement, e-referral, and digital healthcare solution for ophthalmologists and optometrists. As you can see, he has achieved a lot, and that truly proves he is a nerd. So welcome to the nerdy family, Dr. Dave.
It's great and an honor to be called a nerd. Thank you for saying Dr. Dave, which is really nice to hear. Because my entire life it's been Dave. And I remember years ago, I published an article with a very good friend of mine, David Ruston. And he was the second author, and people always thought that he was the only person who wrote the paper because it was Dave Ruston. So I never got acknowledged for that paper. So nowadays I put an accent on the E just to make sure there is a difference between Dave and Dave.
Yeah, I know. I think those things do help, right, with people with pronunciation. But yes, I definitely can say Dave and did pick it up the first time I read your name. So
that's great. Thank you.
And yes, at Nerdy Optometrist, we do acknowledge and we have all the cool nerds in the eye care industry who has been part of this podcast. So we definitely make nerd and nerdy really cool out here. And
nerd is the new cool.
That is the new cool. Absolutely. And I know that, your introduction is like a little, just a glimpse of all that you have done over the years. But I would like you to kind of step back and go really, really from where everything started. Because some of my guests did bump into optometry. Some of them had optometry as their plan since they were kids. I want to know, how was your journey? How did you bump into optometry and eye care?
Yeah, so I guess you only know about optometry if you've got somebody in your family who is in the healthcare industry. In my case, it was nothing like that at all. And for me, it was more or less a visit to the optometrist. I'm quite proud to say I've got nice 5 diopter sills in my glasses. So, you can imagine I was frequenting the optometrist quite a lot as a young boy. So, it got me interested in it. And especially the fact that it's kind of a profession, which is a healthcare profession. It's got medicine involved in it. It's got a business aspect to it. But what really drove me was the fact that I had autonomy. So, I don't think I was ever going to be someone who will kind of work in a kind of corporate environment. It really wasn't for me. And the fact that I could have my own practice, grow it how I wanted to, develop it, specialize, and do all those great things that independent practice allows you to do is really what kind of drove me into it.
But I have to give full credit to your optometrist who encouraged you and showed you these different aspects that this industry offers, because I totally agree. It has so much to offer in terms of the business, the clinical, the research, and I think you've done most of it in your introduction, as I've highlighted, that you've done innovation, you've done business, you have done research, like you've done it all. But tell us a little more about, it's great that you wanted to get into optometry, but you have achieved a lot. So let us talk about your professional journey a little bit, and if you can break it down of how did each of these things happen?
I went straight from school. So in the UK, you do your A levels, and I was sort of a July baby. So that means that I was probably the youngest in the year. So I'd finished my A levels at 17. So I went into university just at 18 to do optometry. And unlike the US, we don't have like a graduation program for a basic, like a medical or a science foundation. You go straight in. So by the time I finished my optometry degree, I was 20. So then we have like a year and a half professional exam. So 21st birthday, I was a qualified optometrist. And I was sort of sick and tired walking into practices. And I was sick and tired during my professional year. Patients sort of saying, are you sure you're qualified? Are you sure you're qualified? And it really just bothered me, and I just could see the fact that it's just going to happen for a number of years in my career. So I kind of took the step that I wanted to go into higher education. So I wasn't sure at that stage. So I'd had an offer for a place of medicine at the University of Birmingham, and also an offer for a PhD at Aston University. So my undergraduate was at City in London. And then because of the way the funding system works here, a 6-year, 5-year medical degree would have been self-paid, which kind of at the time it was an unaffordable thing to do. And my PhD was funded. So I kind of took the decision to go and do the PhD, which was, for me, looking back now, probably was the best thing. And I always sort of think whatever happens for the best. And I think it was the right decision for me, because I wouldn't have done all the other things I do, because although I love the clinical side, there are a lot of the business side and the development side that I wouldn't have ever had that exposure to if I was a full-on ophthalmologist by this time. So I'm pleased I did what I did. So yeah, did my PhD. What happened after that? So that was for like 4 years. Mm-hmm. And then on the day of my viva, I sort of thought about having my own practice. Although I enjoyed research, I didn't enjoy the red tape surrounding research. I felt I could still do that from my own practice. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to start a practice from scratch. So I didn't buy an existing practice, bought a building, and started the practice. This is going back 27 years ago now. And started it from scratch and sort of built it up from 0 patients to where we are today, where we're running like 2, sometimes 3 consulting rooms practice, and it's a full-time practice. Although I'm not there full-time, I'm sort of there maximum three days a week, and then I split my time. So shall I carry on?
Yes. I actually also had a question before we kind of talk about the latter half of your journey. This was really interesting where you mentioned that, you did your PhD and it gave you an aspect about like business and innovation. Usually PhD is kind of tied with the fact that, oh, you're only going to do research, publish papers, and like that's the set mentality, right? But I liked how you mentioned it helped you with the business, it helped you with innovation, it helped you with a different perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect with PhD?
Sure. So my PhD wasn't. It had a bit of a clinical element to it, but we're on the nerdy optometrist, so I'm a bit of a maths geek. I love maths. I'm a bit more of a nerd in that side of things. So my PhD was all about corneal topography. So in those days, topographers had just come out. I remember the amazing topographer was the ISIS and the TMS-1. So that had just come out, and so I was very lucky to have got a PhD which was to do with topography. So although it didn't tell me anything about business, it taught me about product development, and it taught me about obviously developing algorithms and testing those algorithms, and then testing them on a cohort of patients. And prior to that, even just artificial models of structures. So it gave me a huge learnings on product development, I guess, if I reflect back. And obviously publications were absolutely essential in that area. But it was a good time to do that PhD because that's when things like refractive surgery, PRK were just coming on board. There was a lot more interest on RGP fittings for keratoconus rather than sclerals, as well as Ortho-K, obviously. And that kind of probably leads to the next part, which is the Ortho-K.
Yes, yeah, I think that's a good segue. And I really liked how you mentioned and did talk about product development. And I think I would want to kind of talk about it a little further ahead in our conversation. But yeah, let's talk about the second part of your journey about orthokeratology and everything that you're doing like now.
So yeah, I guess you could kind of split it up into two areas. One which is kind of clinical, that side of my life, and the other side is obviously the product development side. So there's a number of people who are kind of key in that area, but certainly in terms of something like Ortho-K, I remember I mentioned Dave Ruston, who's now in the corporate side of industry. And of course, that's another career development path that people shouldn't forget. But he and I he helped me, he worked at a very prestigious practice in London. So when we were comparing the topographer that I built out of a salad bowl and LEDs, he was probably one of the first practices in the UK to have an ISIS topographer. So we were kind of compared to that device. So, but he and I went to a lecture from an amazing optometrist, John Mountford, who is also known as the godfather of orthokeratology. And he was really inspirational to me because I heard what this guy who in his practice on the 40-something floor in Brisbane in Australia was doing and collecting data for Ortho-K. And I was absolutely amazed because he'd collected enough data for 2 or 3 PhDs. You know, it was amazing. Wow. So I was privileged to attend his lecture. And then once we got talking to John, he was like, wow, we could really work together. And that's how it started with John, David and myself ending up writing this book on orthokeratology.
Very, very interesting. I don't know how you had time, but I believe that's what makes you a nerd and brings you on this podcast.
Well, I have to say it wasn't all. It was majority of the work was John's, and I was kind of. I feel like it's his book, and I'm privileged to be a co-author on that. Really, so yeah.
That's wonderful. But I really like, and I wanted to kind of go back to this discussion about product development. And you also mentioned about that is another career path in probably corporate side of things. And I really feel like now there is this whole boom of technology and eye care and the corporate side and the startups. But you had, as you mentioned, right, like you did all this years ago. So any advice or any thoughts here in terms of looking at say PhD or optometry from the product development side, because we are consumers in the sense like company will bring a product, we'll use it. But you have built a product, you started thinking about algorithms, comparison, how can you develop your own product to help the eye care industry? Do you have any insights or any tips for people now in the industry of how can they look at issues and kind of think about product development instead of just product consumption?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is you've got to be passionate about it. I mean, if you don't follow your dreams, you can't force yourself to be good at everything. So, if you are really passionate about something, you'll find learning in that area so much easier. And then the second side is obviously ask questions. It's so much easier learning from somebody who's made all those mistakes already. So asking people and not worrying about looking stupid is really important. Obviously, try not to ask stupid questions. So do some of the
your research.
Do some of the background work. I think that's at least a prerequisite that you should really, if you're enthusiastic, you'll have done that. And then the rest will kind of lay itself out because your interest in that area will drive you to attend more meetings, to meet the right people. And there's obviously you've got to have a little bit of luck. I was fortunate enough to have a gentleman called Andrew York, who really who's managing director of Topcon actually in the UK now. But I met him. We still talk about it because he said, I met you at Aston and you were this really cocky young guy who thought you knew it all. I don't quite remember it that way, I have to say, but but he obviously, we kept in touch, and he was really helpful in kind of introducing me to the right people. And then as I started to meet people from Japan and the development team there, because obviously these people are not really accessible,
Right.
then obviously your enthusiasm and your abilities hopefully show through, and then it leads to one thing after another.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of how you mentioned of, the power of networking and talking to the right people, because sometimes you feel you just reach out to people when you need something. Like,
Yeah.
it's most of the time it's transactional versus many a times when it's your real interest, where you are trying to kind of build something or just know what is going on in the industry, and then you would not know what opportunity lies in front of you. So I feel that's a great example of you just trying to reach out to people in the area that you were interested in, and then you were able to kind of get into all these new avenues and aspects of the industry.
I think the other thing is that things have obviously changed from 30 years ago in terms of my journey, and you just got to be a little bit wary. I mean, these days, people find out about you through social media, and
Mm.
sometimes you can be really proactive on social media. Another guy who's obviously doing all the work and working really hard and is passionate about that may not be quite so proactive, probably because he doesn't have the time. So, I think you've got to balance that. Even if you're a nerd, do something on there, because you've got to be seen. And if you're not seen, you're invisible. Nobody's going to find you. But the other side of it is you get people who are posting all the time,
Yes.
and that doesn't necessarily mean they're the best either at that. They're not. They may not be the nerds. So it's a kind of a fine balance between what you post, how you post it, and being found. So put a little bit of effort into that. Obviously, conferences and the traditional approaches to putting publications on and attending conferences. Even if you're a clinical optometrist, you can still be doing presentations, posters at conference. You don't have to be part of a university. That's important to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you again, I am so excited about like all the topics that you're bringing up, because social media is something which I know there are many people who even reach out to me. They're like, oh, I can't post every day, or like, do I have to be consistent? Do I have to do this? I'm like, I understand social media is exhausting. I myself have times when I'm like, okay, you know what? If I don't feel like it, I won't post it, which is fine. It could just simply be, say, instead of writing your own post or putting something on social media, you can comment on something interesting that you read, or if someone posted. That's also a way of saying that you did read, or you do exist. It could just be a meaningful comment to something that has been already posted, so people
Right.
know, you do exist and you've read and you're interested in it. And it, as you mentioned, it could be a case, it could be a publication, it could be a research, it could just be a link of like, this is my work, just check it out. It could be as simple as that.
It could even be a question.
Yes.
It could even be a question. It's a huge resource of knowledge there, and I mean, a lot. You learn more from your mistakes than you do from all the amazing things that you do. So sometimes there's nothing wrong in being wrong.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's also something that I keep talking about to like many people. I am like, do not fear failure. It's just going to make you better, and at least you'll have a good story, if not more.
Yeah, yeah. 20 years from now, they'll be on your podcast saying, "I did this stupid thing."
Well, absolutely. But when we talk about product development and everything you've done, right, we talk everything about the clinical stuff, but you're also working on developing this uh, CAPTIV8 Connect, which is like your e-referral patient engagements platform. And of course, switching gear from something which is you're working on algorithm for topography is one aspect of it, but building another platform, I'm sure it might be like a shift. How did that happen? What's the story there?
So, if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, right, you'll probably invest a few £100,000 just, or even more, just trying to find what the need is in a market, what a consumer need is, or what a medical or a clinical need is. Obviously, I've never had that luxury. So the way I've established needs has been very organically. In other words, from my experience with patients, I mean, I've always enjoyed communicating with patients, with clinicians, be it giving a presentation or even just talking to patients in a practice. And I never really thought of it as something that I excelled in, but actually, when my patients came out and they would talk to my front end staff, they would always make really good, positive comments in the main. And I realized that actually communication was a really important part of any clinician's life. So, and if you do it properly, we're not all blessed with a natural ability to communicate, because someone might be brilliant clinically, but not able to deliver exceptional explanations to patients. And also it took time. So that led me to sort of develop the first version of CAPTIV8, which was basically we developed patient educational animations. And although I was kind of initiated that whole process, these days we've got like a team of amazing animators as part of our company that work for us full time. And so we make probably the best 3D medical animation of any ophthalmology condition, any optometry related, surgical related thing. So we were only in ophthalmology. And we built a system that allowed people to communicate in a logical order. So it will tell you what you start. You might start with symptoms and then vision and then an explanation on the treatment and then surgery. And you can kind of show little bits and bobs of that to the patient. And then we realized, well, actually, that takes a while. What if we could, for those that want to do that, great. But for those that haven't got the time, wouldn't it be great if we could share that content? And so then we built a system where you could share it by SMS, you could share it by email. And then we thought, oh, that's great. What if you could brand that to the optometrist? So then when people share it, it brands it with the optometrist or surgeon's logo. And it evolved because then we started to do things like adding an appointment button on there. We added the ability for the patients to share it. We added the ability to embed this on the clinicians' websites and even make a QR code and have that on reception and all those kind of things. So, but, the long and short of it was still a really good patient engagement and marketing platform. We still needed more. And so, over the last, I read on the news, I was listening to the news and it said, or maybe it was an article I was reading. It sort of said, well, don't worry about the pandemic because great things evolve from things like this. And that really resonated with me because I thought, wow, okay, the clinics are closed. It's time to just pause and think and just, put a strategic plan together and think about what we're going to do next. What direction do we need to move into? And I'd always felt that optometry and ophthalmology, rather than being, like this, they needed to be like this, and we're fortunate in the UK, we don't have such antagonism at all with ophthalmology. And we tend to work really, really well together. So we decided to build a referral platform. So to connect all of our optometrists and ophthalmologists together, building a secure system that would allow referral back and forth, two-way referral, with obviously the ability to add these all the great imaging that optometry practices have invested in, be it OCT, topography, all the different scans and things that we take, Optomap images, and being able to put these automatically into a referral so that when it goes to an ophthalmologist, they've got all this amazing data at hand. So, and that whole thing connected to a point where we've consolidated the engagement, the education, the referral, and now also digital consent or electronic consent built into the same application, because consent's not just important for ophthalmology, it's mandatory for ophthalmology, but these days with optometrists doing things like myopia management, ortho-K, contact lens consent, Optometrists here are also, in hospitals, certainly they're doing things like intravitreal injections, retinal lasers, corneal cross-linking, glaucoma, SLT treatments, YAG treatments. So, those things will move into primary care, hopefully. And we can probably talk about that too. But yeah, that's going to be a really interesting development. So the consent was important.
I think this is very interesting how just the small idea of creating patient education material did flourish into such an amazing platform which has so much more. And there's this saying where we say like an idea can change your life. I think that this is a true example of an idea of just making better communication and like then spreading it across and helping other people led to so many other pieces that you did build together and put in a strategy to it. So I think this is really interesting for anyone who has an idea. I would say just go for it, move forward, discuss it with the right team, and you never know what that idea can lead it to.
And one other word, persistence, because that original idea may not work.
Right.
But you may have something there that just needs a lot more, as we would say here, meat on the bones. You need to add a lot more to it because in its current form, it's not quite ready. So,
Right.
and some people kind of regard that as a failure, or some people think, well, okay, it's not going to work, or but everything starts from a fundamental basis, and you have to grow that. So, when you have rejections or hurdles or barriers to adoption, they're not really barriers.
Right.
They're it's and it's I can tell you hand on heart, when you're the developer of these things, it hurts when when you hear that, when you get those barriers, it really hurts. So but you've got to have thick skin and you've got to have that determination. And the one thing I learned was, don't regard those barriers as being negative. They're just another great suggestion to go and develop that additional part that you need. Obviously, you just don't go and build everything that your people suggest willy-nilly, because you have to investigate it. But in general, as a general rule of thumb, there's a reason why people aren't buying your stuff. It's because there's a reason behind it. They might agree on the fundamental principles of it. It just needs more work to it. And once you've done that, it will flourish. And you can see that history in so many entrepreneurs who have come from nothing and made something of themselves. It's that drive and persistence to know that what you've got to believe in, and it realize that, yeah, you've got to make it better and continue to do that.
I think that's wonderful how you brought and did talk about these challenges, because that was going to be my next question, that we did talk about all amazing things, but tell us a little more about roadblocks. You did guide us on, how to kind of take that and make it into a more positive change to make your product or like your idea more meaningful. But what has been your biggest challenge throughout your journey? Because I'm sure there'll be many, but if you can share like few of them, and how did you overcome that?
Ooh, time, I think, and time management is probably the biggest challenge. So I think balancing all those things with, your clinical role to, development role, and obviously the most important thing, your family,
Right.
is definitely a challenge. So it's, again, I think I'm really blessed with having a great family, or great wife and kids that are always behind me, and they're really interested in what we do, or what I do with a team, and a great team that I'm part of. So, the guys who work within the company, they've been with us from day one and have been with us for like 15 years, so they haven't moved on, they've stayed with us and they're behind it. So I think those are the great things. The challenges, in addition to time, well, I guess your mental health, so having an outlet is really, really important. It's something you read about, but we all, especially entrepreneurs, they're terrible at understanding that they need to have an outlet. You don't think you can just work every hour of the day, because it's not good for you. It's not good for your mental health. Do something that is going to take you out of that zone, because 3 hours of tired thinking is equivalent to 30 minutes of, amazing thinking.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, you need that time out. And it's no surprise when people come back from a holiday, they're so much more invigorated, motivated. You need those things. So plan that. It's not a competition of who does the most hours. It's the quality of those hours that's important.
That's absolutely, and I so loved that you did bring this up, because I was also going to ask you, like, does it get overwhelming with like so many things that do exist with, you have to kind of present, give a talk, have your own clinic, work on your product, and like the software side of things. It can be overwhelming, along with your family, right? And that's something that I'm so glad you did bring it up, because sometimes I just have like a job and a podcast, I would say, but even with two things plus your family, you can sometimes feel I'm not in the right mindset to do this, but you're like, no, I have to do it. So that, do I want to do it versus do I have to do it? That struggle keeps on going back and forth, and it just takes out the productivity or the fun out of the process. It just becomes a chore instead of an actual fun activity that you started working on. So I think that balance is really important.
And obviously, if there are deadlines, you can say no,
Yeah.
that you can't do it. I mean, it's about what you produce at the end that's important, and also, if you can't do it, you can't do it. But ultimately, it's only a matter of time when it will be done. So, time will deliver all the deliverables. So let time happen, but don't kill yourself doing it. Make sure you take that time out for yourself. But yeah, absolutely.
That's a great advice. And I really loved how you said, like, don't kill yourself. Because with you doing so many things, if you have time, I'm sure we all can do better with our time management.
Time management, delegation, I think again it's another problem with I think if you're a small company and you're the kind of person leading a team, you tend to want to do things all yourself,
Yes.
and sometimes you're not the best person to do it.
Right.
It's been a lesson I learned the hard way, really, not through advice, but I delegate a lot more, and it's really important to delegate. And actually, people who you give those opportunities to, they relish doing them, and they pick up things that you don't. So it's really, really important to have that as a team. And even in modern healthcare, you have a multidisciplinary team. You have teams that do different things. So, and it's important to not just let those teams do their things, but to get together and talk about what each of those roles have been, and discuss individual things. Or it could be a project, it could be a patient, it could be all sorts of things. But sometimes when you've sat together and discussed it, it brings up things that you didn't realize, because in your own little world, you're in your consulting room just doing one thing. You don't know what's gone out on this person in location A, location B, or location C in your practice. So having a joint collaboration is really, really important, and that applies whether it's optometry, ophthalmology, or even whether you're developing a product. You talk to your end user, you talk to your developers, you talk to the system infrastructure, you talk to the marketing team. There's so many aspects to it that you have to bring together. So teamwork literally does make the dream work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I think now we did talk a lot about, like, the practice, your journey, and everything that you've done. But now we would like to dive into my game segment, which is another fun segment that I really enjoy. And it's mainly to know a little bit more about you. Okay. So it has got very little to nothing about optometry or eye care. It is just about knowing you a little more. And it's a simple game. It's called this or that. I'll give you two options. You just have to pick your preference or things that you like.
Okay.
All right. So first question, are you a dog person or a cat person?
Dog.
All right. What do you prefer, phone call or a text?
Text. That's a nerdy comment.
Glasses or contact lenses?
I'd love to say contact lenses, but with my 5 diopter cells, it's going to be glasses, I'm afraid.
All right. Online shopping or shopping in store?
Sorry, I just thought of another answer for the previous question. I'm going to say clear lens extraction. Sorry, next question.
No, we'll take that. We'll keep that for sure. I'll add that in my next game when I do with someone else, probably something else, we never know what we come up with, but that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back to the next question. Online shopping or shopping in a store?
Online shopping every day.
Online. All right. Oceans or mountains?
Oceans.
Okay. Horror movie or comedy?
Comedy.
Most important thing in your partner, intelligence or fun? I mean, being funny.
Being funny.
Being funny, all right. Movie or reading a book?
Movie.
All right, wonderful. That was this and that, and I definitely know a lot more about you.
After reading papers all the time, the last thing you want to do is read a book.
Well, that's wonderful. So I definitely know you prefer movies, and then that's something that, that's fun. We can do something together for sure. But before I let you go, thank you once again for this amazing conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure all my listeners also did. Any final takeaway message for all of them?
Well, have a great career, and you're in a great, wonderful profession, and keep pushing the boundaries. Don't be afraid of, your road to qualification is just the first step, and there are so many things you can do, and just keep pushing the boundaries. It's and enjoy it. Don't go into anything you don't enjoy, and that's simple, obvious piece of advice, but we don't always follow it. So yeah, make sure you enjoy it. Have a bit of
That's
fun.
true. That's true. I loved it. Like, keep pushing your boundary and, enjoy what you do. Thank you once again for your time and all the piece of advice that you shared and everything that you're doing for all of us to help our life and our industry much better. Thank you once again for your time. And again, warm welcome to the Nerdy family.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Take care. All the best of luck with your fantastic podcast.
Thank you.
Bye bye.